Hello and welcome to Top Sim. My name is William Lebowski, and today we're going to be talking about rFactor 2, the British touring cars, and just kind of a general state of rFactor 2, all things considered. So the British touring cars are not brand new. However, the Q3 content drop did drop some brand new BTCC cars, being the Hyundai and the Ford Focus. ST, and so we are now looking at a half of the grid for the touring cars, 4 cars in total, and for me that was good enough to pull the trigger. Quite frankly, 2 cars out of the 8 cars was just not enough. Granted, it's not like I got any price decrease or benefits by waiting, other than just missing out on the first drop of British touring cars, but it looks like this platform is one that's going to be here to stay, especially considering motorsport games and their I guess we could say soiled plans to have their own British touring car sim itself, and it seems to be a backup plan to just piecemeal them into rFactor 2. And so the first question that I had before purchasing them, before driving them, and was curious, just being curious about the 2 new cars in and of themselves, and that question is, are they good? And yes, these are good cars. They're done extremely well. The attention to detail is very high. They look good. They feel good. So yeah, these are great cars. Even as far as to say that they're not just good, I think they're great cars. From the way that they feel, from the way that they handle, from the way that they behave, whether it just be the AI themselves in these cars or whether it be the way that the car itself behaves. And the difference now with you're seeing the Infinity now. I'm driving the Infinity that was first released with the Toyota. And this is a rear-wheel drive touring car, which I find to be really cool. It changes things up. However, you still have that traditional front-end feel with a touring car, and as you'll be able to watch the temperatures and tire wear, the front end still gets plenty of heat and still gets plenty of wear, even though we're looking at a rear-wheel drive car. You can see now as we go through that right-hander, that front left really lit up on fire, didn't it? It really got warm, and as we go now taking it over 170 degrees even through that corner. So yes, still a lot of classic touring car characteristics, even though it's such a big change to have something like a rear-wheel drive touring car. So I think that that's really awesome. I think it adds more to everybody really loves to refer to any touring car as just a unique field because of the front-wheel drive systems, and I don't think that has been lost even on the Infinity, which is my favorite of the bunch because of the unique characteristics of it still being front-end reliant, but at the same time being able to move some of the pressure to the rear. By pressure, I guess I should say not literal pressure, but tire wear, and well, I guess in some aspects pressure when you're accelerating. But anyway, I just think that makes these cars even more unique. Question number 2 that I was thinking to myself coming into this video: does the British touring cars move rFactor 2 as a platform, as a sim forward? And I do think the answer to that one is yes. However, I think we need to wait for the actual performance results until number 1, more/all/a better environment of content has been released for the touring cars, because right now the feel that I get anyway, even though there are they did release Donington, they did release Brands Hatch, the feeling that I get anyway is that we do now have some cool touring cars, but you kind of have to find the right environment for them to race, because rFactor 2 really up until now, up until these British touring cars, has really just kind of been a set and forget on endurance racing. So all of the tracks, all of the content, etc., have really been heavily revolved around endurance racing, which is someone like me, an endurance racer, why I feel like this sim is so perfect. But now when we jump into the touring cars, I find a lot of the tracks selection that I would normally jump in right away to be a little bit lacking. And so I don't know if this is a point that speaks to a broader point, or if this is just something that's a bit of a growing pain, so to say, and it's just a matter of finding and trying new tracks, and there are certainly plenty that'll fit, so to say, like Zandvoort here, British Touring Cars release. Oh, by the way, this is my very first ever race in the British Touring Cars. So if you see some Rube moves, it's because of that. And there is particularly one big Rube move at the end of this race. But just as I was saying, this is just me getting to grips with the touring cars themselves. So the first thing I did, I bought the touring cars, downloaded them, get into the game. The first place that I brought the British touring cars was the Netherlands. And so I do think it's just going to be a case of finding tracks that will, suit them perfectly. And if you're already a fan of the touring cars in any kind of capacity, whether that be from the British Touring Car series itself, or whether it be from the 24-hour series or whatever other series you're used to seeing them in, I think you'll pick up tracks along the way more intuitively. But it is a little bit interesting finding tracks that are not too big, and not in terms of width of the track, but if we were to take these obviously to Le Mans or Spa, I think we're cutting off or biting off more than we can chew with the platform of the British touring car. But something like Zandvoort and even Bahrain has been, in my experience, real good for them. So it's just going to be a combination of finding the right ones. I am still holding out a little bit longer before getting Donington and Laguna Seca and Brands Hatch. That's just it's just a personal thing, not any kind of principled stance. So does the British Touring Car class move rFactor 2 forward? Yes, it does, but it will really leap forward if there could be more support in terms of new tracks that would really suit these cars well. And if we do pay attention to what tracks have been released recently, especially in this 2022 series of content drops, I do think that those tracks, Laguna Seca especially, perfect for touring cars. So I do think they have that in mind. I do think it's moving in the right direction, and I do think it'll be in a much better state, next quarter than it is even right now. So yes, I do think that ultimately the British touring cars will and do move rFactor 2 forward. Is there room for rFactor 2 in British touring car growth? Yes, there is room for it, and that shift does seem to be happening, like I mentioned earlier, from endurance-based racing that they just kind of set and forget. Studio 397 is just kind of set and forget for a few years now. So I do see the ship turning to be one of those platforms that can handle something like some real serious endurance team-based racing. I do think that they are dipping their toes into the waters of other types of sim racing, especially ones that are popular right now. The touring cars are, in not just British touring cars, but touring cars across the board are so hot right now. And so I do really, really like seeing rFactor 2 capitalize on that moment. So yes, there is room for the growth, and I do think that rFactor 2 Studio 397 / Motorsport Games is moving in that direction. However, I would like to see a little bit more of a steeper correction in terms of the ship metaphor, steering the ship. I do think that it needs to move a little bit more quickly in order to really support this before the excitement for the touring cars fizzles out before that content arrives. Now moving into questions that really address rFactor 2 as a whole and as a platform, and less specifically about the British touring cars specifically. And does the Railroad 2.0 cut it, so to say? How is its performance? Is it really a brand new experience, a 2.0 experience? And I don't think I can say it feels like a brand new 2.0 experience. To me, it feels like a significant continuation. And by significant continuation, I don't mean a big change. I mean a logical next step for the rFactor 2 physics that we are currently seeing. I do think that ACC, when they dropped the new 2021-2022 content, I think it was an update. Was it in 1.18? That was it that big update where they significantly changed the physics and tire behavior and track behavior in terms of its effects on temperatures and pressures and in speed, and that was a big change for regular rFactor or regular ACC users. That was noticeable. That was big. That impacted your setups dramatically, and impacted your driving style dramatically in a way if you were very used to what would have already been the meta. If you were someone who was like me, who just kind of jumped on ACC every so often, you could tell that there was a change because it did feel differently. However, it wasn't necessarily one where it's where even the blind, so to say, can see it. It was definitely very much one of those changes where you had to be in it to notice it, so to say, and which, of course, is like any kind of change. If you've never had any experience with it, how are you going to know something's new? And so that was kind of the point, though, where ACC definitely had a big feeling in its driving style, and that's where I went from someone who didn't necessarily get into the way that the cars felt to someone who really enjoyed that experience, and the realism and thus immersion really jumped up huge for me after that update. And now ACC is up there with, some of my greatest sim racing experiences just because of the way that the cars feel. So what does this have to do with Real Road 2.0? I do think rFactor 2's update to Real Road 2.0 was a bit less dramatic than it could have been, than it needed to be. I think the big thing that we're looking at here is everybody knows with rFactor 2, you got to run the lowest tire pressures to be competitive with lap times, and you can kind of trick the setup into a meta and to allow some impossibilities in the suspension, and then using suspension and aerodynamics, and then using things like the lowest tire pressure to kind of make up that kind of grip, which is not something that can happen in real life. So I was a bit hoping to see that tire pressure meta be changed and to be updated to where that wasn't necessarily possible anymore, but that is not what happened. Oh, and here's my big kerfuffle. Here's my race ender. So I expect like a Real Road 3.0 or something, or maybe just continued changes and updates to what we already have, because I do think that bigger changes could really change rFactor 2 for the better. But overall, do these are all of these updates combining to boost rFactor 2 to something better than it was previous? And yes, I do think that. I think it's possible that rFactor 2 could be entering this stage where it is now a bit like AMS2, always improving, always trying to change itself. And I think that is a bit of a direction that rFactor 2 needs to go to make some improvements as things go on before it gets too far into its second half of its bell curve. But anyway, we've run out of time here, fellas. Thanks for watching. I do appreciate it. Let me know what you guys are thinking about rFactor 2, and I'm very interested to hear that. Let me know in the comment section below, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching.